I'm Dr. Vanessa Sinclair, and this is Rendering Unconscious. My guest today is Roben Farzad. Roben Farzad hosts the weekly program Full Disclosure on NPR One and is a special correspondent on PBS NewsHour. Born in Iran and raised in Miami, he's a graduate of Princeton University and Harvard Business School. He was a senior writer for Bloomberg Businessweek for a decade and has appeared on CNN, NPR, CNBC, MSNBC, and CBS News. He's here to talk about his book, Hotel Scarface, where cocaine cowboys partied and plotted to control Miami. This book is about the Mutiny Hotel in Coconut Grove, Miami, Florida. This hotel was the inspiration for the setting of the Babylon Club in the film Scarface, and is a place that I have a special relationship with. For more, check out its website, hotelscarface.com. And follow Roben Farzad's podcast, Full Disclosure, on Apple Podcasts and fulldradio.com. Follow him on Instagram and Twitter at FullDRadio. As with all Rendering Unconscious podcast episodes, there is a video accompanying this episode at YouTube. Just visit Trapart Film's YouTube channel. That's TRAPART Film at YouTube, or search for Rendering Unconscious Podcast. Links to everything can be found in the text accompanying this episode. You can visit my website, drvanessasinclair.net, or the podcast's main website, renderingunconscious.org, for links and more information. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at rawsin_. That's RAWSIN_. Rendering Unconscious is also a book, Rendering Unconscious, Psychoanalytic Perspectives, Politics, and Poetry, from Trapart Books 2019. For more information, you can visit our publisher's website, trapart.net. That's TRAPART.net. You can support the podcast at our Patreon, patreon.com/Vanessa23Carl. That's VANESSA23CARL. Your support is very appreciated. Thank you so much for supporting Rendering Unconscious Podcast and all of my other creative endeavors. Do you have any place in particular that you want to start? Should we start with the end of your book?
I don't want to give that part away, but that's the part that I wanted you to get to. So, okay. For us to connect.
So where do you think we should start? Anywhere in particular?
Let me turn it around and say I'm fascinated that someone reached out from that era where not to spoil the book or anything, but when I discovered it was in the early 90s in its state of utter disrepair, and that you lived there and knew it intimately. And revelation to me that Trent Reznor and Marilyn Manson would party on the roof where cocaine kingpins used to party. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, exactly. My friend, the way we connected with them was that my friend Jessica, who set up the bed there and everything, she had somehow, she was a beautiful goth girl, so she had somehow hooked up with someone in the band that plays with Nine Inch Nails. So we didn't have Trent Reznor there, but we had the other guys from Nine Inch Nails. And we did have Marilyn Manson and all the spooky kids there. And it was all around the same time. It was like 93 must be like when they got signed or something. I think they had played like on Miami Beach, like Washington Square. I don't know. That whole time period is a little
It's
hazy.
A blur.
It's a little hazy.
I remember with friends being at that, it's gone now, but the Cocoa Walk area, which had all these chintzy tropical drink bars and Dan Marino's Sports Bar and Grill, and later the Cheesecake Factory. And from the balcony of this setup, you would just see the apparition of this abandoned tower, fenced around with its antenna collapsed, and the garage collapsed as well. Hurricane Andrew was in August of '92, and it really did a number on what was left of that edifice.
Yeah, exactly. That makes it make sense. So I'll start with saying that, well, first, seeing the Cocaine Cowboys when that film came out in like 2006, I think it was. I left Florida in 2007, and it was like right before I left, I saw that film, and I was like, oh, my whole life is making sense right now. And
Yeah.
then discovering your book just a few months ago and reading this, which everyone should get, especially if you're in Miami. One of my friends, I told her about it. She was also around that time. She's like, oh, I have that book in my guest room for my guests to see on the table when they come over. It's so funny. But yeah, this like really puts a lot of things in perspective, and like puts like, I love how you lay it out, and you talk about the political history of the time, and then these different kind of people's life trajectories and how like one built onto the next. And it really helps me like situate myself within like this kind of place and time frame as well, because before just a few years ago, I really was just like, I didn't put any of this together. We knew that the mutiny, when we lived there, we knew that the mutiny used to be this like old disco hotel that had all these like weird themed rooms, but we didn't know the extent to which it was what it was.
Do you remember the number on your room specifically? 9th floor, 9 what?
There was no rooms. It was totally blown out. It was just like cinder blocks. The whole
cinder
place.
block, but it had its own door.
There was no doors.
Wow.
There was no doors or anything. No, it was all like just like cinder blocks blown out. It was not like rooms. It was like,
I wonder in a past life it was the Bordello suite, if it was Moroccan Dreams, 130 different themed rooms.
Yeah,
we know the designer.
Talk about the rooms.
Gosh, the Cappuccino Suite, Marrakesh. I got to interview the owner, the founder of the place, Burton Goldberg, and he passed away in 2016. He was loosely kind of the Hugh Hefner of Miami, but he was this accidental nightclub mogul, and he had the not dumb luck. I think, I don't know, there must be some kismet to it. He built this complex in 1968 called Sailboat Bay Apartments. And it was just this sterile combination condo office concept that was really great. And he was going to use it as a beachhead to take over Fair Isle, Grove Isle. But the city thwarted him. He didn't grease enough palms and everything. And so he sublimated, and I took psychology in high school, that's about it. He sublimated that frustration into becoming a nightclub mogul in the early 70s. And what a great time to do that. If you resolve by 1971, you know what, screw it, I'm going to rename this the Mutiny. They were looking for a nautical theme. And he told me I would call it the Sex Hotel if I could. I wanted a hotel for swingers. I wanted something that dealt with the seduction of the swinging 70s and reefer madness and boy meets girl and everything. What happens in 1972 is you have these nominating conventions that come to town. You have Richard Nixon's best friend, Bibi Rebozo, has a suite at the hotel, and he's coming in between Key Biscayne and the marina at front of Mutiny. You have the Super Bowl bound Miami Dolphins and all this international press descending on this place. And shortly after that, you have the oil shock, which floods Miami with all sorts of, as I said in the book, Venezuelan and Gulf shake horn dogs. So he adds this restaurant and this club and piano service and everything, and it just explodes in popularity. And throughout the 70s, the Cubans and the Puerto Ricans envy the moneyed Venezuelans there, and they're trying to get into the place. And one small bar and dance floor turns into 2 floors and 3 floors, and before you know it, it's the Studio 54 of Miami by the end of the decade, with 130 different theme rooms. He realized that the business, instead of becoming a real estate mogul, he says, I wanted to cater to the business of seducing the Latin American male. So if you had this adult fantasy land, you'd come to this place, you have Mutiny women would serve you, you'd have bottles of Dom Perignon, you'd have people would party for blow and for everything, and then on top of it, more than 120 different themed suites, like a perverted Epcot Center. of sorts. And so how do you even make that up? One last thing, Doctor. There's a recording studio next door, Bayshore Recording, where the Eagles and Joe Walsh and Fleetwood Mac would come through. You throw in more than a soupçon of celebrity, and all of this stuff combusts with cocaine money, and here you have one of the hottest hotspots on the planet.
Yeah, it's amazing. So you talk about this as well in the book. My parents are from the hippie generation that was just before this, right? So like when my mom like left home in like the age of 17, and she like took care of herself and lived in the Grove from then on. So 17, that was 1960. And so she worked at this place called the Gaslight, and the Gaslight, the Gaslight had like a sister place in New York, and so like all the acts would come down from there.
Yes,
like Bob Dylan and Patti Smith and all these people. And she used to live with Stephen Stills like as her roommate, and David Crosby. If I ever say like he lived with them, she'd be like, he crashed on our couch. He never paid anything.
He crashed on everybody's couch. Crosby and Nash wrote a song about the place called The Mutiny at Sailboat Bay. So did Neil Young when he broke up with them. He wrote Midnight on the Bay on a cocktail napkin, and he performed it for the staff in his suite. And a lot of people mistook both of them for hobos. That's the amazing part. Crosby was so free-based out. If you read his autobiography, they thought of him as like the lost dog of Coconut Grove. It's really a different time and place. Women would sun topless in Peacock Park, used to have roosters running wild. It's very different from what it is today.
Yeah, very different. And then the house I grew up in was on Douglas Road. So like where Main Highway hits Douglas Road, you can go left or right? So mine was just to the left. And I went to St. Stephen's, which is the like little elementary school with the little church right across the street from the Mutiny. So then to read this and be like, this is what was going on across the street. And like Peacock Park was like where we had PE and like played kickball and softball and
softball and all this stuff was going on in there.
Like right across the street. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. And then basically, as I told you, after Hurricane Andrew, totally destroyed Miami, and it totally destroyed the house that I grew up in, and my mom just kind of like lost it. And she like divorced my dad and just basically kicked me out. So it was 1993, like right when school got out, like May 1993. And then that's when I met my friend Jessica, who I already knew from being in the Grove because I was already like hanging out at the park. Like teenagers used to just hang out in the park all the time and stuff. And then she's the one who had set up that kind of spot. And she actually grew up at Dinner Key. Like her parents grew up. She grew up on a boat.
On a boat. There were a lot of people like that. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people like lived in the boats in the marina at that time. So she grew up there. And then by this time, her mom had a house that was like more towards like going down 27 to Coral Way, like down there. But yeah, she ran away like really young when she was like 13. So we met up when I was like 15 and she was like 14. And she just had like incredible survival skills. And she's the one that set up that place. I think she had tried, like a lot of people slept like on the bottom two floors, like on the first floor and the second floor. There's a lot of, as you say, like people smoking crack and stuff like that on the bottom floors. And she said nobody would bother to climb up to the 9th floor because it was just like way too high.
Well, let me ask you what I want to revisit my seeing the place in 1994. And as I said, it was owned by it was part of the wreckage of the savings and loan crisis, which is now an ancient crisis where this bank, this notorious den of iniquity, was owned by Uncle Sam by the late 80s. You know, the bank that owned the mortgage on its Sunrise Savings and Loan was a notorious blow up. And so the government was a reluctant owner. It shuttered the nightclub by the 1986, 1987. And then when it couldn't sell the whole thing, it shuttered the whole thing. The hotel was closed. Where would you walk in? Would you walk into the front entrance through the chain link fence and you'd go up the stairs? There was no husk, nothing left of the club or the discotheque?
No, we walked in, there was like Miami Subs on this side. And then where the fence started, like after the Miami Subs and stuff, you could get in that way and get into a stairway.
But there was no vestige of the nightclub or restaurant on the first 2-3 floors?
No, everything was totally gone. It was just like
That
cinder blocks.
stairwell to the pool, that stairwell to the second floor, that was no longer there. That they built the club, the club was built on with a staircase in the back by the pool. It was all gone.
Yeah, I don't think I had a really understanding of what it looked like because
Wow.
I never saw it before. I only saw it this way, you know. But I
It's
just remember
crazy.
we would go through the fence like and go right out to the Miami Subs, and then you could get. I know this because also when you go to the Miami Subs, first of all, we would like steal the paper cups and like go get soda,
Yeah.
and then second of all, they had their
The owners were friends, by the way. It's that small of a world.
Yeah, and then they had their bathrooms were like right there by their like
Like,
kind of little back
yeah,
entrance. So we would that's where we would like go to the bathroom all the time. Or we would like bathe ourselves at Coco Walk and the movie theater
it's
bathrooms on the
amazing.
ground
The
floor.
movie theater back from beneath the escalators. I could place it perfectly.
Yeah.
And then what's amazing to me is you could just go Google Newsweek, Miami's Grove of Crack. That's what it was known for, because I think the tennis star Jennifer Capriati was found smoking crack in a motel nearby in
I
Coconut
was there
Grove.
that night.
Oh, really? With
That's
her?
so funny. Yeah, my friend, I don't know if I should say his real name. I don't know. He's probably dead now. His name was Mark. My friend Mark was dating her, and we did not know that it was Jennifer Capriati. I actually like when, so in 2007, after I left Florida, I moved to California for my postdoc after school. And then I worked there for a year. And then it was like the economic collapse or whatever. So even though I was supposed to like have a job at this university counseling center, they were like, sorry, we're cutting the whole program. And so I was like, well, what do I do now? And they're like, well, you can collect unemployment. And I was like, I just got a doctorate degree and you're telling me to collect unemployment. So I was like pretty pissed off at that moment in my life before I found a job in New York and moved there. And so I started like reflecting on the past and stuff and writing a lot. And I started writing down all these memories. That was one of them, was the night with Jen. And and then I had to be like these stories that I have are like so insane and surreal that I'm like, is this real, or am I just like, have I just like
If you
made up
don't
this
write it
whole
down,
life?
if you don't write it down, that's what a lot of the habitues of the place said to me. They said, one, I can't believe I survived it, and two, I can't believe I lived it. If I don't write it down and tell you, the older I get, the more it's kind of occupy that gray area between, am I recalling it or imagining it from a dream, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So I spent this time, like these 6 months where I was unemployed in California, like writing and then Googling and seeing like, are these real events or have I like made things up and stuff? And then I've been able to verify.
I got to ask you, so you timestamp 1993, 1994. In the 13 years between then and say you leaving Miami, you cleaned it all up, went from squatting in the mutiny to getting a postdoc.
Yeah.
Like how did you do? I gotta ask.
I don't
Turning the
know.
tables for a minute. How
Survival
did you do that?
instinct.
So how long did you squat at the mutiny, and then who did you move in with?
Well, I ended up, my friend Jessica, she's the one who just died last year, as I mentioned as well. She never went back home. She left and she was on her own from like age 13 on. I ended up going back to my mom's house at like the end of 93, like around the time when school started. So I was only actually homeless there for probably 4 months, which is a long time when you're 15 years old.
Yeah.
But I went back to my mom's house and then basically my mom left. I still don't understand what she was doing. I think she went to Texas. I don't know. Basically, she ended up somehow getting involved with the guy who was like hired to fix up the house, like the contractor or something. And then he lived in Texas and she like basically went to Texas and I was basically alone in my mom's house for all of 11th grade. So this is between 10th and 11th grade. Hurricane Andrew was August of 92. The day before was Lollapalooza 92, by the way, because that was significant in my life. I finally got to go to a concert, went to Lollapalooza, and then like my boyfriend Mario's parents picked us up and are like, oh, this hurricane's coming. And then like my entire life changed. And then 10th grade was that year, and I was at Ransom. I went to Ransom Everglades for 7th through 10th grade. And then that year is when my mom kind of lost it, not kind of, did lose it, and then kicked out my dad and me kicked out me at like that towards the end of the year. And
So you stayed in this house and then you applied to college? You just went still
I
you
ended up
you, you
at community
refocused?
college.
Wow.
I went to Dade. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
went, it was a Ransom 10th 10th grade. And then after my parents got divorced, I didn't go to Ransom anymore. I went to Gables. And then my mom basically was gone in 11th grade. Like she would come back for, I don't know, a couple of weeks and then she would leave again. And there was actually also all these construction workers at her house, which I've never brought up to her, but there was like construction workers, like our house was still under construction. And she like left her teenage daughter there with all these like strange men, which was very, I don't know, I just can't comprehend what was going on in her mind. But that's why I went into psychoanalysis for many years.
You got an associate's degree at Miami-Dade?
Yeah, I started at Dade, and then I moved to Tampa, and I lived to basically get away from all of this. And then I lived in Tampa for like 3 years, and that's where I finished with my associate. So it took me 4 years to get an associate's degree because I was working full time the whole time. Like I worked in, when I was in Tampa, I worked at, well, first I was a telemarketer selling like botch cruise vacations that people won, like calling and telling people they won these cruise vacations that they didn't win. And then that felt horrible. I lived in Clearwater. And then I got a job at Target, and I worked at Target for like 3 years while I finished school. And then I realized after taking 4 years to get an AA, I was like, I'm never going to get anywhere like this. So I actually did, which was probably the hardest thing I ever did in my life, was I called my mom and I asked her if I could come back and stay with her and finish school so I could at least get my bachelor's degree, like not in another 4 years. So I moved back to Miami and stayed with her. But very quickly got a boyfriend and just moved in with him instead. Didn't stay with her for very long. And then, then finished at FIU with my bachelor's. And then when I had my bachelor's in psychology, I finished with that in December of 2001, right after 9/11. And then the next year in 2002, I started at Nova Southeastern University and got my PsyD, which is a doctorate in psychology from 2002 to 2007.
You're made of strong stuff.
Yeah, it was survival instinct. 12th grade, I became quite a nerd, and I like started hanging out at comic book stores, and that was very good. They also did something because I'll never understand other adults. When I was at Ransom, I was really good at math, and I was set to take like calculus 2 or something, and the way they had me scheduled in math. But then when I went to Gables, they didn't have all the math, all the different levels of math that I would need to graduate, but you had to have 4 years of math in order to graduate from a high school in Florida. So all of the adults got together and they were like, what math do we give Vanessa? She's already doing calculus and she's already done this trig. And so they decided that they would put a 17-year-old, they would let me, also during lunch, there was 2 lunch periods, lunch 1 and lunch 2. During first lunch, I would sit in the principal's office and tally. This is before sophisticated computers. This is 1994, 95. I think I graduated in 95, so 1 year after you. They actually had me tallying whether people were absent, present, or tardy from their homeroom slips every day. So I was sitting there entering people's attendance, and they decided that that would count as my math credit to finish high school. So basically for 12th grade, I was a nerd in that in the evening, but we basically meet my friends at school and go immediately to Denny's and hang out at Denny's until first lunch and then go to first lunch in the attendance office and enter that we were all there. And somehow never got in trouble for this. So nobody noticed because, Gables, there was like 1,000 kids in our class or something insane. So there was, no accountability. But anyway, I graduated. So that's a miracle, basically. How about you? Where did you go to school?
I graduated in 94, and I thought I was leaving Miami for good. I went to Princeton in New Jersey and everything. And this story haunted me while I was up there. When I got homesick, without, again, giving away the book, I would type that address, 2951 South Bayshore Drive, into InfoTrack, LexisNexis, anything I could. I just remember I had it in my wallet on a little Post-it note or a little receipt. And it just kept coming up in news stories and informant records and police busts and all these characters kept emanating out of it. And I pick it up and put it down and pick it up and put it down. And I finally resolved, 15 years later, to put together a compelling enough book proposal to get it done. It always felt fraudulent for me. I was 4 or 5 when most of this stuff happened, in the heyday of the mutiny. And so people would say, what business do you have going back there? What business do you have trying to conjure up an omniscience? But in many ways, it's kind of a love-hate letter to my hometown. We share a trauma. You definitely had a trauma centered there. In my case, I came from Iran in the late 70s. My aunt was in medical school in Miami, and it was a time of a lot of difficulty for me and my family. I didn't speak the language. I'd get pried off of my father every morning at drop off at preschool. I didn't know if they were going to come back. And I do remember it was a time of riots. There was an acrid smell of Miami burning at that time, even though we were in North Miami. The refugee crisis in 1980, the race riots, the McDuffie riots. And like many people who left Miami, who grew up in Miami, there was always something unresolved about it. And I felt kind of ineluctably like I had to go back to that address. And I don't know. I'm not given to phantasmagoria and that much of the supernatural, but there's something about this address.
Yeah, there's something about that spot. That's what me and my friend were talking about. I talked to Jessica's sister and told her, because she wasn't there, she was younger than us, but she knows that we stayed there. And I said, that somebody wrote a book about that hotel? And she was like, no way, but of course. She's like, there's just something about like the energy of that spot or something that it's clearly attracted a lot of something.
something about that spot.
Something else.
Over 20 years, I've had so many dreams that have taken me to the hotel, trying to imagine myself through the stories and the oral histories of people. And it was without talking my own book too much, it's something that I'm just so happy and proud that I got to write the book that I wanted to write. There was always a commercial pressure to depict this place as a whorehouse or, a place with just sleazy slime bags and everything. But the ecosystem was largely observed. The cops most of the time didn't bust the cocaine dealers there. The hitmen, a lot of the bad things didn't happen at the hotel. It was just a place. It was a DMZ, if you will. It was a free trade zone, international waters. And that, to me, if you could find a place that lets you tell the story, if it's like a layer cake of Miami, how do you not tell that story? There's a friend who got in touch. I'm not going to call her out by name in case she wants her anonymity, but she came to the book party and she was from my high school, and she found her adopted mom who partied at the mutiny, and it was like borderline, I think, cocktail waitress at one of the other places, but was one of the party girls at the mutiny. And they bonded about it. And she told me a story. I think, I don't know if it was Steve Madden, the shoe designer, or Steve Madden's brother, was on a balcony with back then. And he had a big cocaine problem, and he hung around the Grove and everything. And he was freebasing or something on the balcony, and he fell off. And he thought he was being sucked into purgatory because he fell. And as he came to, he woke up and saw a bunch of naked people with animal heads and looked up and sees a gigantic phallus and a gun. And the people in the jungle suite, or whatever it is, are having an orgy. There's a lioness, being mounted by someone else on the bed and everything. And these guys go up to him like literally naked, but with an elephant head. And he's thinking this is something out of Fellini or something. And they think he's DEA. And he hears his girlfriend banging on the door. Where is he? He's like, he's going to hell. And the girlfriend comes in and is like, no, my boyfriend fell off the balcony. And they're like, do you want to get in on it too? And they're like, no, stuff like that. That didn't even make the book, belated stuff. Or Crosby and Nash throwing money out of the balcony. I'm not Crosby and Nash, the Doobie Brothers. And all the groupies. I interviewed a venture capitalist recently. He invests in clean technology. And he was a valet at the mutiny. I think he went to ransom as well. And he just remembers one of the kingpins getting out of his limo circa 1980, and this glass vial spilled on the driveway, and everybody immediately fell and they put their noses to the driveway. Like, you cannot make that stuff up. So when you realize that there's a chance, if you research enough of this stuff and if you embed yourself, that you can have that story, it was brutally difficult to report and write, but I'm happy that I did it.
I'm happy you did it too. It's really made a lot of things make a lot of sense. Yeah, and I like every page. First of all, I love your voice because it's
Thank
such a
you.
Miami voice, and it's made me realize like I knew once, I didn't know when I lived there, like the Miami people have a certain way of speaking, but then when I left and talked to other people and then I would see a Miami friend again, I'd be like, oh, familiar, I know this person. And the whole time I read your book, I was like, oh, this is so Miami, like all the phrases you use and everything is really nice. It was really comforting and nice to read.
Again, I had some imposter syndrome issues with it, but it's really touching when people read that and say, you totally captured the aroma of the place, the essence, which is, if you obsess about something enough, you could feign an omniscience, I guess, right?
Yeah, but I wonder why you got obsessed with it. It's just so interesting.
I had to go back and reopen 1980 Miami. It was a really traumatic time for me. It was where everything that I've spewed forth from that period, just like you can say 11th grade or 1992 and what happened with your mom and the terror of doing that. I haven't spoken with you all that much, but gosh, like, it's what you're made of now. You turned it around, you picked yourself up, got the associates, got the bachelor, got your PhD. You're in the most enlightened country on the planet, and by dint of social media, 2 ships passing in the night. For all I knew, when I saw the place, you were up there on the 9th floor with your friend.
Yeah, I know. Well, the way you described it, I was like, that was us for sure.
Because there was that Eddie Money.
For sure, that was us.
It was Eddie Money concert, I believe, at the Coconut Grove bed race.
I remember that day. Yeah, absolutely.
Which was
and I told there's 2 Jessicas. There's the one who's passed and another one who's still around, thankfully. And I told her, I was like, he talks about this specific day. She's like, I remember that day. I'm like, I know, that
because
was us.
what happened was, when I looked at the vista and when I saw the attics and the Goths and everything staring out from this mysteriously abandoned bayfront property, which, why was it abandoned? Why was there a government tarp around it? And at that point, literally, as if on cue from Peacock Park, the late Eddie Money, I wanna go back and do it all over, but I can't go back. God, no. And that was something about that. I remember vultures in the pool. I remember Zima was a very big drink. Everybody was drinking Zima.
Everyone was drinking Zima.
And I just kept hubbing and spoking back to this moment. I mean, I've met people in Sedona and they talk about it as a vortex city or something, but the corner of South Bayshore Drive and Coconut Grove is kind of my vortex place on this planet,
I do know. So much has happened to me on that corner, whether in the park or down. There used to be an area where Peacock Park is where the baseball area is.
Yeah.
Now there's like all those townhouses to the right, but that used to just be all mangroves, right? And you used to actually be able to like walk along this little rock wall and like sit over there. We used to sit over there, and there was tons of kids, like hippie kids and teenagers and runaways and stuff, that would have tents in the mangroves over there in the park. I used to sleep there too, and we called this little rock wall Stonehenge. And we'd be like, "You want to go to Stonehenge?" Wow. Where we could like sit like not in the open space of the park, just sit like kind of back in the mangroves on the wall. And we used to sit there and like just throw rocks in the water, stick our feet in the water, and hang out there.
Do you know what was in the Anchorage back in the heyday of the mutiny? There was a billboard on the corner of South Dixie Highway or US 1. I don't even know. I grew up in North Miami, so whatever the heck all that 95 converges into by Coconut Grove, whether it's US 1 or South Dixie, it's all exotic to me. Yeah. But everybody tells me that, notably at the exit where you would turn left east to go to the heart of Coconut Grove, was a sign for the Moonflower Escort Agency. And if you were an international high roller or something, you would call in, you would page Moonflower and get yourself a Moonflower. There was some chintzy line about it, but what's amazing is they had a yacht in the Anchorage in Dinner Key with a dispatch operator and women and everything. And you could order, this is awful, but so transactional. You could order Venezuelan, mulatto, international model, everything. And It was all there to service the hotel from a yacht with cell phones and ham radios and everything. And it was busted in 1983. But this hotel, and I spoke to madams and various people, they would say, you would just jump at the chance to take a gig at the Mutiny, because believe it or not, more times than not, a lot of these coked out heavy hitters, they just wanted someone to talk to. And they'd pay you $5,000 for the privilege, and you might get a tiara or something gauche out of it and everything. And you'd be partying with them the next night anyway, downstairs. There would just be, of course, it became exploitative. Of course, there was abuse, of course, but especially pre-AIDS, the open transactional nature of this thing, coke for sex, coke for blow, pay for play. You could be a mutiny girl or a bored housewife or a kingpin's wife or mistress who wanted to spite him, who wanted to go out and party. It was a completely different era.
Yeah, and I tell people all the time that I'm from Miami, like cocaine in Miami is like weed other places, It's just as common.
Yeah. Yeah, you get a lot of it. I mean, I spent time in the Hamptons and everything, cocaine there and Vail and in Aspen. But the way it all came together in 1980, and to take it back to the late founder, Burton Goldberg, what great luck to have erected something like that in the early 70s, because by the time reefer madness and cocaine madness, it all kind of made Miami the capital of Pan America. All of this cocaine money was coming in to the tune of a $5 billion cash surplus at the Federal Reserve Bank. One of the top students who was working there became a cocaine kingpin at the Mutiny, incidentally, because people wanted to rope him into money laundering. You couldn't resist the riches. I mean, if somebody told you, and if you're completely devoid and untethered from ethics, that Vanessa, I got a hookup on the border between Peru and whatever, it's going to get us cocaine paste for about $3,000 a kilo, $4,000. By the time I cook it and cut it and process it and everything, we can extract street value of about $300,000 selling it in Miami, whether it's to some crack people in Overtown or Carroll City, whether it's some quality stuff for the most discriminating clients. By the time we all chop it up and process it, we will have plus or minus $300,000 in cash for you fronting me $2,000 up front. There are a lot of people that would take that risk and say, yeah, I do 1 or 2 kilos, I buy myself a house, I'll never do this again.
But then they do.
They do. They do. And the amount of money, the stuff that was being bought there at a time of economic crisis for the rest of the country, the recession in 81, 82, the amount of inflation was very severe. But this place was an oasis away from it. And on top of the fact that Miami was blowing up, there were race riots. You want to talk about the roof of the Mutiny? One of the main characters of the book, Molly, who discovered her sexuality there as a mutiny girl, she said when the race riots happened, in the McDuffie riots, and there were shots being fired all across Coconut Grove, because Coconut Grove it's called the Black Grove, the ancestral Bahamian community that serviced the hotel industry there in the late 19th century. They were brought from the Bahamas to be hotel workers. But then it turned sadly into an area of dereliction. And as it was, gunfire was going on, a bunch of people, the bartender took a bunch of kegs and Katie barred all the doors at the front of the Mutiny. And Molly and a couple of old, Cuban freedom fighters and everything snorted a ton of blow, went into the champagne and wine closet, got out a ton of machine guns, took to the roof, and started shooting at everything and nothing to defend the honor of the Mutiny, right? It was lawless. And she remembers bullets ricocheting off of the spiral staircase on the roof and the antenna. And I just remember metaphorically, someone says, I remember when that was happening and I was in my room watching grainy footage of Mount St. Helens erupting opposite the United States from where Florida is, right? Diagonally opposite. And as the bullets are hitting the antenna on the thing, the footage is coming in and out of the nightly news. Like, what? Right? Two sides of the United States are erupting. I can't believe that. No cop was going to venture into that place. The Mutiny was going to defend itself, darn it, And the fact that he had all these machine guns. And I found informant records that pointed out the manager who would hide automatic machine guns and everything in the champagne cellar. Like, what?
And how the girls
Um,
would put them in their dresses or whatever.
Molly, she knew if there were a cop coming in, I'd hide it under the cushion or under my dress. And again, she says to me, one, I can't believe I lived that, and two, thank God I'm alive.
Yeah, a lot of my friends are gone, sadly. Yeah, there was a lot of parties on that roof for sure. And
Yeah.
actually, when Jess was hooked up with, I don't know if it was the bass player, the drummer, some guy in the Nine Inch Nails band, didn't meet Trent Reznor. All my friends were like, "I know you met Trent Reznor." I'm like, "I didn't," but but we were in wherever was renting on Key Biscayne. He had like rented some place on Key Biscayne, and it was, I guess he made the soundtrack for Natural Born Killers, because we all got to watch Natural Born Killers
Before it came
before it
out.
came out. Yeah, which was pretty fun.
This is critical experience now. People would always say, Farzad, do you think you did sufficient? And I don't want my kids to hear me or anything, but did you think you did sufficient research and that you didn't try this stuff that you wrote about? I was like, you know what? You could get me an ambulance and some paddles, and you get me just enough that was sustainably sourced, that no farmers were hurt in this and no solvents were made in it. Maybe I'll try some, right? But you got to have the paddles and everything ready, because I haven't tried it.
Wow,
You know?
that's amazing.
And all the reporting, it was offered to me and everything. Come on, have a bump. Let me tell you about there's a human, and it's called the anatomical snuff pouch. I can't tell you how many dopers told me, if you do this with the fatty part of your thumb connecting to your thing, you can make a little Coke spoon for just the perfect amount of toot. I was like, great news, you could use. I'll put that in the index.
That's amazing. Well, now
Yeah.
too, I think it's a lot more dangerous with this like fentanyl or whatever that it's
Fentanyl
cut
laced
into
stuff.
everything.
Yeah.
It's killing so many people.
Yeah.
A
You
lot
have
more
all these
dangerous.
people telling me, though, that they say, I never thought I would try it. And then the first time I tried it, a lot of people would say, just, it was described to me like, you think you could save the world and you stay up all night. And one of the nicknames for it was Perico, which is parrot, because you stay up yapping all night and you want to change the world and you have all these ideas and everything. And it kind of reminds you of, Marky Mark, Dirk Diggler, and Boogie Nights. And then the problem is no one wants to wake up in the morning to actually save the world. And then by the time you wake up at 5 with a terrible headache, you just feel dirty. And you got it up and down, uppers and downers and uppers and downers. And a lot of people, to taper off this, would become alcoholics. And there's still opioid dependencies. We've gone into, the innocence really came off of this very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with pharmaceuticals. A lot of people get addicted to pharmaceuticals after this.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so I feel like reading your book, it's like every page I'm like, I have a story about that. It's like all these characters from my life that I have like these weird tangential relationships with, you like fleshed all of it out. Like you said, the Jennifer Capriati thing, that all the people that were interviewed, there's like a Sports Illustrated article wrote about that right after it happened, and like all the people that interviewed are all friends of mine. I fortunately have some sort of sixth sense, and like right before it got busted, I was like, I'm gonna go. And I was leaving, and while I was like leaving, I saw the cops come, and I was like, oh, glad I'm leaving. And then my friend Mark brought me that Sports Illustrated article. He showed up at my school when I was at Gables and brought it to my class, and I remember looking at it.
That it was
like,
called Miami's Grove.
This is so weird.
Miami's Grove of Crack. And then there's a Miami Herald article that Bill Clinton was visiting either in 93 or 94. And I remember the Coconut Grove Chamber of Commerce and what is the Historic Society of Women, the Women's Club next door by the library?
Yeah.
They always complained about the mutiny, about its overflowing dumpster and the vultures and everything. And they say, this is embarrassing. Can we not drive his motorcade past the mutiny or McFarland Drive? Because a lot of these presidents, including George H.W. Bush, would stay at the Mayfair. What's hilarious is we have very plausibly Pablo Escobar in the early 80s visiting the mutiny and ordering a dish in the back of the kitchen while George H.W. Bush was staying at the Mayfair a few blocks away. And these two, of course, would meet together in the early 90s as the war on drugs fully took shape, right?
Mm-hmm. No, it's amazing. And the whole history that you go into with like Peter Pan and the Mario Boat Lift and Bay of Pigs, and how all these guys were like kind of brought in by the CIA to go back in the Bay of Pigs, and it felt abandoned by the US government.
Yeah, and then I don't know, I throw sublimation around loosely, right? If you're anxious or depressed or have unfulfilled, I don't know, sexual desires, and people would say, I'll run a marathon and sublimate my thing to it. Maybe I'm not using that correctly, but I was going to call a third of the book sublimation, right? Where the anger and the unkept promises and, Castro was never taken out. We could sublimate it into precipitation in the 1970s with all this coke coming in. I said, why be poor, dude? The U.S. screwed you. Go and make some money while we're waiting for Havana to fall. And of course, Castro survived how many presidents?
I don't know, like 10. A lot.
But it was a high class thing in pre-revolutionary Cuba. It was the high class people would do cocaine. They would call it postre, which is pastry. You'd see it like on a little ivory saucer or in a governor's mansion or something, and it had the highest consumption of cocaine in the world pre-revolutionary Cuba. So it was an indulgence that was brought to Miami, but little bits of it. I mean, you might find like saffron, right? You don't find kilos and kilos of it, right?
Yeah, and that's another connection, the mob connection, which is a big thing in Miami, and of course was in Cuba and New York. And how you said that the Bert Goldberg, his dad had a part in the hotel in New York that Lucky Luciano and Al
Yeah, you could
in.
look it up. It was called the Navarro on Central Park South, and it's in a book called Havana Nocturne, which is in some ways the prequel to this, how the mob won and lost Cuba. A lot of gangsters would party there with the Beatles, with Rolling Stones and everybody else like that in the 1960s. But Miami was ripe for this. Miami had the mafia, already had a bunch of people taking out hits, the Jewish mob, the bookie wars, the Italian mafia by the 60s and 70s. And these guys were natural allies of the foes of Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro broke up the mafia, smashed the slot machines of the mob-owned casinos in the streets of Havana. And people like Santo Traficante and these other U.S. crime bosses were working in cahoots with the CIA. All that stuff has been uncovered and declassified over years to take out Fidel Castro. They had all these harebrained schemes to assassinate him, and no one succeeded. And I think that it was a very powerful thing to say, okay, by the time Jimmy Carter is president, he's not really prioritizing, gung ho, let's go back and take out Fidel Castro. A lot of these guys turned to pot and cocaine smuggling, and they said, we'll bide our time. And they did get a second chance. You want to talk about sublimation with the Iran-Contra crisis. And a lot of these same people were the ones who gladly sold cocaine to fund arms to the Contras in Nicaragua. They saw that as a proxy fight against communism. So I like to say that this hotel was where the sexual revolution met the cocaine wars, and Iran-Contra and the savings and loan crisis. All of these scandals crashed into one another.
Yeah, no, you really tie everything together so well in the book. And now you have to tell me what that book was again, the prequel, and I'll have to read that one too.
Havana Nocturne. You would love it. TJ English, I love him. I've had him on my show. He just gets it. He gets it really well. I don't think a lot of people realize that this was Vegas in the Caribbean, Cuba. And a lot of these guys wanted to come here. And they tell me wistfully, some of these dopers, like, the mutiny was for us what the Tropicana Casino or something would have been if Fidel Castro wasn't there. It's like a continuation of what we had. That life, that scene and everything. And of course, it was replicated in the movie Scarface. You could pull up the screenplay, Oliver Stone's screenplay, and there were many times that he wanted to reference the Babylon Club, which was the fictionalized version of this. And he mentioned the mutiny. And as he described the mutiny, 2-3 floors of converted apartments with various bars and bands and women in specific cocktail outfits, the kind of the thinned out blonde look and everything to all of these different things that he incorporated in the movie. And of course, the owner did not want him shooting at the mutiny. The Cuban dopers hated the idea that you were going to caricature Cuban refugee, a Mariel refugee, as this violent villain. But what's funny is as they got out of prison in the mid-'80s and as this movie took on a legendary following, a lot of them would say, I'm Tony Montana.
Yeah, that was about me. I love that. How they're all like, this is about me.
Yeah. To this day, they're like, bro, I'm Tony Montana. Because, I had a cougar. Like, that's it. I had a cougar. He's really a composite of a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't know that either. That totally blew my mind. I had no idea
No.
that that was based on the mutiny.
Yeah. It's there's too much stuff. I mean, he stayed there, they researched there. He himself was coming off of a crippling cocaine habit, Oliver Stone. And a lot of these characters look the same. The phones that were plugged in at the table, if you try to compare the Babylon, everything. But ultimately, so much of this production was kicked out of town that most of it was shot in SoCal. Um, it was so controversial with, I think there was a Miami-Dade assistant commissioner or something who passed an ordinance and said, we want to change the script to make Tony Montana an agent of Fidel Castro and everything. So it's kind of hilarious. You remember Ralph Rennick, right? Um, so Ralph Rennick, the most famous person I think in Miami news history, the elder statesman of was CBS, the affiliate or something. He would sit at the bar, just drinking himself, terribly depressed out of the Mariel crisis, and he had this commentary. He just exhorted Miami commissioners to stay out of the business of Hollywood. We need this business. We've been a war zone for 2 years. And I just think it's hilarious that he too was sitting at the bar at the Mutiny daily before his newscast and taking notes.
It's amazing. Now, what I did was after I finished your book, I had seen the Cocaine Cowboys film like in 2006 or something when it came out. Then after I read your book, I watched the new one that's on Netflix. And it was really nice to put like faces to all the characters. Like I knew everybody from reading the book. And I was like, okay,
Well,
that's this person, that's
it
this
mentioned
person.
the mutiny ever so briefly in episode 1. Those guys, the Kingpins, were saying that you knew when somebody's load came in because they would put the Burger King crown on their table. But they also wrote the intro to my book. They were very kind about that.
Yeah, it was nice to put faces to everybody's names.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned the Bee Gees too. There was a period of time where I was friends with Barry Gibb's son, but I didn't know it was Barry Gibb's son. He was just like some skater kid on Miami Beach. And then one day we went all back to his house and we like go through these gates and like down this long driveway with like all these trees. I'm like, where are we going? And then we walked into this guy's house. I mean, he was like dirty skater head, long hair in his face, 90s grunge little kid. And then we go in his house and there's like gold records on the wall and there's like white Bee Gees suits, from Saturday Night Fever or whatever. Like these white suits framed on the walls. And I just went, well, your dad must really like the Bee Gees. And
What
someone with
time
me
is
was
the
like,
Bee Gees?
his dad is the Bee Gees. I was like,
Yeah.
oh. And the funny thing is, my teenage mind, this was when I was even younger, I must have been like 14, 14, 15, somewhere around there. The thing I remember the most, one was actually getting lost in the house. Because it was so big and there were so many rooms and it may have been a little off. And they had like intercoms where like they started talking to me like, Vanessa, where are you? They're like, push the button on the wall, find one of the intercoms. And I was like, what? Talking to me. That was funny. And then the other thing I remember about their house was the kitchen and how they had like these pantry closets that like line the whole kitchen and this really long island. And the island had like all these glass jars of different kinds of candy. Like M&Ms
Wow.
and Reese's and Snickers, and there's just like kids' dream, it's like jars and jars of different kinds of candy.
So
And
one of the main dopers, that house is on Key Biscayne, right?
yeah,
One of the main dopers in the book had a house next door to the Bee Gees and would either Roben Give or someone loved to come and tour the covered boat garage that these guys had. Dopers loved. It was a reason why Coco Plum was kind of elevated because you could build a garage for your boat. You could bring loads in more discreetly if it was covered. So some of the other interesting things about the cocaine economy down there. They also noticed that this is your crew kind of. McDonald's was running out of its spoon-tipped coffee stirrers, and the central office in Chicago had to write and say, "What the heck are all these restaurants running out of these coffee stirrers?" Because kids would wear them in 1980. It was this ironic thing, especially if you could get it gold dipped and everything. It was the perfect thing for portioning out cocaine. And they turned it into a flat paddle instead, right?
that's
Just
why.
stuff that you can't imagine.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember seeing Coco Plum after the hurricane, and I remember seeing like I had friends that lived there. There was like literally like boats like on the second floors of people's houses because they had gotten like thrown up.
Cocaine Plum, it was nicknamed. A lot of dopers lived there. And a lot of dopers would just shuttle back and forth to the mutiny. It was just down the road.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, thank you for writing this book, Robin, and for talking with me. Was there anything
Oh,
that we
you're
didn't
very
get to
welcome.
that you wanted to mention? There's so many things I could talk. I feel like I could flip open any page
Well,
and have a
hold up that
story.
cover because I regret it. That cover was forced on me. The Europe cover. They for some reason thought that the cover that you see most of over here was
Yeah.
something that people wouldn't understand. But that's not me. It's kind of this bullet
Oh
flying
yeah.
thing. But they said it was more for a sensibility there. Originally, they had a razor blade, a European razor blade with a South Beach behind it. I was like, no, this is not. And South Beach didn't even look like that in 1980. So it's very hard communicating the aesthetic and the time and place to people. Like, I do TV appearances and everything. They're like, he's here to tell us about the illicit South Beach Hotel, the mutiny. I was like, no, it's not South Beach.
It's
It's,
the Grove.
the,
And like you
the
said,
Grove at a different time and place.
South Beach then was like it was not
Nothing,
the South Beach that people think
nothing.
of. It was like
You should
retired
see,
people.
and you should see that thing on Netflix. It's called The Last Resort. It's about the photographer Andy Sweet, and he covered South Beach and its kind of final throes of dereliction in the late 70s and early 80s. He was sadly murdered in the early 80s. Um, but people to this day, I go home to Miami. It is absolutely unrecognizable. They call parts of Biscayne Boulevard the Upper East Side and Midtown and Wynwood and Little Hades all the rage. And there's something called Ironside. I'm writing about a time and place where really there was this place in Coconut Grove and there was a discotheque in the Omni. And South Beach was an old age home. It's a very different place. Now you talk about tech and all these New Yorkers moving, but you could plausibly say that modern Miami started out of this peculiar vortex address that I've obsessed over.
At the mutiny. No,
Yeah.
because when we skipped school, we would actually go to the beach because the police would not look for us there. Like if you skip school and went to Dayland, they would find you. Like,
They
oh,
would
kids
find
in
you. Yeah.
Dayland, they'd be like, no, you can't. So we would go to South Beach because nobody would go to South Beach. It was
Yeah.
like no one would bother you there. You just go hang out on the beach all day. There
And
wasn't
then
anything
by
to
the
do,
mid
but you don't need
by
anything to
the
do when you're 16.
so by the time I was in high school, it was either do you want to go to South Beach or the Grove? That was the kind of the binary of it, And the Grove was Coco Walk and the stereotypical, Mexican guy with 8 parrots on his shoulders and a margarita bar and everything behind it. By then, it became caricature. But Coconut Grove is one of the oldest parts of Miami. It had one of the oldest hotels and the oldest municipal meetings. It was annexed by Miami in the 1920s, and so much of what you see today kind of emerged from that ooze.
And that's the thing too, that when after Hurricane Andrew, the Coral Gables got fixed up really fast and like around Coconut Grove, but because it was like unincorporated Dade County or something at the time, it didn't get as much attention. And I remember going to
Right.
school like in October and we still didn't have like electricity. It was just like insane.
Yeah.
Months
There
later.
was there was one postscript. I mean, a regular at this place was O.J. Simpson in the late 70s, as he was having terrible injuries and he was bouncing from team to team. He partied a lot there, did a lot of blow there, and after he got out of prison, you could go look it up in the New York Post. And the hotel opened after years of very sterilized corporate hotel today. Nothing like what it was back in the day. But he wanted to check in, and it's kind of sad. He made a sex tape there.
Oh my
I
gosh.
think in 2001 or something, and it kind of fell on deaf ears. But you have this idea of wanting to revisit the glory years of promiscuity and pre-AIDS and everything, and it's just such a shell of its former self.
Um, I have to tell you where the room was that we stayed on Planet Nine. It was when you went to the back of the hotel and like it's still the Miami Subs corner. It's like all the way when
Yeah,
you go in now, all the way to the back to the left, that very back corner. That's where that picture's taking that I sent you. Very back corner left. So the view is like looking right out at Peacock Park and like the marina there. That's where the
yeah,
bed was. I actually can only talk about this now because because I'm finally in my own house. I'm in a different country and me and my husband just bought a house like in May. And so I finally like own my own house and I'm safe and I'm here in Sweden. And now it's like, and then my friend died, of course, it was murdered. And so it's like I was thinking about that time anyway, and now that we've come to our own house, I finally feel like safe and I can talk about it. But before this, I like never talked
Oh.
about any of this. This is like all very new for me to talk
And
about.
what a small world it is that I noticed your post on Twitter and we direct messaged each other. And, starting off from Miami, plus or minus the same year of high school, and then traveling this far, and 25 years later, 27 years later, here we are talking over the ether.
Yeah.
I just
So
think that's amazing.
it is amazing because I also, which I think I wrote in that post, I never do these like that feeling when posts. I don't ever talk about anything personal really online because I am a therapist. So like, people can Google me and, I try to just keep things work based, and work includes art and things that are weird and magical things and whatever, but it's all kind of work based. I never talk about like how I'm feeling personally or if I'm mad about an issue or anything like that really. And that was literally the first time I'd ever done that. I was like, this is too amazing to find out that this book exists, but I have to make a post about it. And then for you to like respond, I was like, whoa, not expecting that.
Well, there are other people that will have memories from that era. I mean, it's one that I couldn't report very well because a lot of people are on the down low and a lot of people have died.
Yeah.
What are the chances of someone that, you were just passing through a terrible phase in your life, but you put it back together and you maintained a presence of mind and you stayed alive? I mean, your friends, sadly, tragically, I mean, imagine the memories we would have had if we were in touch with her a year ago or 2 years ago. But it's such a treat for me.
I know, that is something I thought about. I really wish that she could know that this exists, this book, and talk to you too, because I think that would really like be healing for her and like her to hear more and like to situate her life in this kind of time as well, because I don't think she really understood all of that kind of perspective of what was going on. And we were just surviving, and I think that happens to a lot of people. You don't really know what's going on sociopolitically when you're just like going to work and eating, making sure you can eat,
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And I think that's also, I mean, of course, someone getting killed anytime is a tragedy, but I think that's why it was extra tragic, was that I really thought that we like were past a phase where something like that could happen, and for this, she was breaking up with this guy, and for him to do that to her, just like, there's no words for it. But he killed himself too, so they're both gone. So if he was here, I could be mad at him, but he's not here either. So it's just like, well, somehow that happened, and it's already happened. It was Halloween weekend last year, so it's been almost a year already, which is also incredible.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But anyway, I like to think maybe her spirit's around and she can hear us. Yes. And I made a lot of art about her. And I'll keep her spirit alive. I've written down a lot of these stories, and I'm gonna make some sort of book out of it. And I don't know that I'll call it like a memoir, but I'm gonna like make it kind of a surrealist book where it's like going in and out of scenes, and it's like what exactly is happening in this scene, and then like goes into another scene, kind of make it creative in that way. So it's yeah. There's a lot of stories. There's a lot of stories when you grow up in Miami.
It's true.
And I love the way that you phrased it, the ambivalent relationship we have with it.
Yeah. To be truly from Miami is to have a love-hate relationship with it.
All right. So should we stop with that?
Sure.
Well, it's so nice to talk with you.
Thank you. I'm glad we're in touch.
Yeah, exactly. We can talk again some other time.
Yeah. Next time I'll give you a co-payment. Oh, they don't have co-payments in Sweden.
Yeah, it's on the house.
They'll pay me and send me some Ligonberries too or something. No, just every trope I could throw at you. You're in a good place.
Yeah, I am in a good place. Thank you for listening to Rendering Unconscious. You've just heard a discussion with Roben Farzad. For more, just check out his book, Hotel Scarface, where cocaine cowboys partied and plotted to control Miami. You can visit the book's website at hotelscarface.com and check out his podcast, Full Disclosure. Just visit fulldradio.com. Subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts, and follow him on Instagram and Twitter at FullDRadio. You can visit my website, drvanessasinclair.net, or the podcast main website, renderingunconscious.org, for links and more information. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at rawsin_. That's RAWSIN_. And now a new song from an upcoming album. The album is called The Cutting Up of Language and Love, and the song is called Ivy and Sally at the Mutiny. The album will be released on Bandcamp soon. It's a collaboration that I did with Pete Murphy. You can check out our previous albums at highbrowlowlife.bandcamp.com. Enjoy. Ivy looked around the room. She and Sally had set up a spot for themselves on the 9th floor of an old abandoned building. It used to be a disco back in the day called the Mutiny. The Mutiny. Here it was anarchy. Anarchy. We called our place Planet 9. Sally had set up a corner of the world and had welcomed me into it. Planet 9. Planet 9. Planet 9. Planet 9.